it's remembering what you came here to do. And what we came here to do is to create. Create could be, I want to have a family. Create could be, I want to create art. It could be, I want to learn more and create a better life for myself using my intuition, whatever that looks like to you. And it could be many, many things, but it's to create. And through that creation, we are in flow and we are in alignment and we are moving and taking those steps that need to be in terms of that bigger picture for ourselves.
Welcome to the Angelic Frequency Podcast. We are your hosts, Christina Aroche
and Luisa Velez. And today we had Nicole Bigley as a guest on the podcast. She is a globally recognized teacher, spiritual teacher, and the host of number 2 Spiritual and Psychic podcast. We had a great conversation all about what those abilities look like for her, leaning into your purpose and intuition, and living a divinely guided life. And it was super interesting. So let's dive in.
Hi, Nicole. Welcome. We're so excited to have you here.
Hi, Christina. Hi, Louisa. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Very exciting. I have a feeling this is going to be a great conversation. This is a topic that's very close to my heart, and I'm super interested and full of questions, so I can't wait to see what happens.
Let's do it.
Yeah. Maybe for the audience who don't know you or are not familiar with your work, would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself, and we'll get started like that?
Yeah, sure. So, Nicole Bigley, and I am the creator and host of A Psychic Story. Today, as we record, it is its 6-year anniversary or birthday. So, happy birthday to A Psychic Story. And I created this 6 years ago when I was at a time in my life where I felt like I had pretty much everything, the job, the house, the friendships, the relationship, everything, and something was missing. And so I had taken about 7 months to really ask Spirit and where should I go, what should I do, my purpose questions, and had the message to start a podcast. And here we are 6 years later. But I'm also an author, co-author. My first book is Looking for Angels, and for 25 plus years of my life I focused on PR and marketing, and now I am in the spiritual world in the woo full time as of this week. So I made the transition and really taking that leap of faith.
That's so incredible. I love that. I feel like, first of all, something about the energy in June and just like this time, I feel like there's a lot of transition and transformation and stepping into new things. So, congratulations on that. That's so huge.
Thank you.
And your podcast, that's incredible. Oh my gosh. Question I have for you when it comes to, just having moved through, you talked about receiving that guidance from Spirit and how that led you to taking these big steps. What would you say is the biggest thing for you when it comes to tuning in and like receiving messages and things like that? Like, how do you know that, okay, this is the thing that I'm going to do? And how do you lead yourself to actually taking that big step? Because I'm sure it was not just, yeah, I'm going to do this. It's going to be so easy. Like, the fear and anxiety that comes up. How do you deal with that?
I think a lot of people have that where there's the very real world scenarios where I have to eat. I need to pay my bills, pay my taxes, that sort of thing. And many of us, the pandemic was probably that moment where it was a big catalyst for a lot of people, where we went within and we were really questioning parts and of our lives and how we show up. And actually, just to kind of rewind a little bit, right before, it was in June of 2019, where I was getting the message to start a podcast and launched it pretty immediately. And my guides and angels were giving me that feeling of something big is happening and you need to get ready for it. And this is going to be a piece of that because you're going to be in service and help others. And yes, podcasts were popular then, but not like what they are now. And so that's another example of where I felt it, how do I say it, intuitively, that something was happening. I needed to take this leap in the faith. And that was a little bit easier for the most part. And we can talk about that too, about some of the struggles I had at that time. And even not doubting it as much, but not necessarily sure that that was the path I wanted to take and what I wanted to do. But when it comes to the job situation and my full-time gig of doing PR and marketing, it was very hard because look, that paid for the podcast. That gave me the ability to do all the other things in my life. But it got to be and get really big at the point where something has to give. And for about 2 years, I kept hearing, it's time. You need to make a shift. There are these other things you need to do. And I did not have time to do these other things, podcast aside. And my guides and angels in my mind's eye would wink, wink, wink. You need to do this. And I'd be like, I'm not ready yet. I'm not ready yet, for all the things, your ego, your fear that kicks in. Not that I didn't know it was not going to be the right path for me, but it was one of those where I'm sure you guys have experienced it too. You still have the questions. So it's trust, really, to answer your question, and trusting that whatever that intuition is, whatever that nudge you're getting from spirit or source or the universe is, it's coming from a higher place that is always within you, but also connected. And so when you can trust more and more and take that leap of faith, and it doesn't always have to be a big leap, but even the small leaps. And so I was making small changes, over those 2 years where I knew I needed to do that, to at the point where then when I was able to, it wasn't such a big leap.
That's amazing and so timely. I feel like this has been today's conversation in a way. Christina, earlier today, we're talking about all about stepping into your purpose and listening to your intuition and how to be led to that next step and what your soul is meant to bring through in this lifetime. So that is resonating a lot with the energy today. Now that you mentioned guides and angels and the woo woo of it all, can you describe a little bit what that is for you and what are your abilities and what do you, on the woo woo side of things, what looks like for you?
Yeah, sure. So when I was really little, I always had this feeling. I shouldn't say always. It was probably when I was like 3 or 4. I could feel this presence in the room, especially when I was by myself and there weren't other people around and, just hanging out. And I could feel this energy or this essence almost as if there was a person in the room, but I couldn't see them physically with my physical eyes. And so finally I got up the courage one day to be like, who are you? What are you? And I heard in my head, almost the way I hear it wasn't like a voice where it was whispering in my head. It was more where, if I say, recall the sound a lawnmower makes, and you can hear that in your head, it was like a thought
Mhm.
hearing. And I heard, I'm Michael. And I thought, okay, cool. This is Michael. And it wasn't until I got older, fast forward, that I realized, oh, this is Archangel Michael, when I really started working with angels and angelic energy. But at the time, it was really what I call more of that psychic energy reading, the ability to pick up on an essence or a presence, a vibe. And throughout my childhood, Michael in particular would give me exercises and help me better understand my empathy and how that worked, what was happening maybe telepathically and other things. And so I really had a coach for the most part throughout my childhood. But that was obviously different to some extent, not how my intuition showed up as much, but how I would use it in my day-to-day life as a child versus when I was an adult. And also when, I would talk about him to my parents and stuff, I would be very clear, this is not an imaginary friend. This isn't, imaginary. This is
Right.
an actual being. And luckily, both sides of my family, my mom, my dad, and then their parents and my aunts and uncles, all believed in this and or had experienced something to some extent. So I had a lot of that support growing up, which was great. If I hadn't, I believe I wouldn't be where I am today, because it gave me a lot of confidence in knowing that this was not my imagination. This wasn't something I was making up, and it allowed me to stay in tune rather with my intuition.
So amazing and so rare, I think, for people with those kinds of abilities, which I believe it's mostly driven by a fear and just lack of understanding of what their abilities are, or those clairs and people who are just born wide open to the world, to the other world, the world behind the world, and how scary that can be. But the fact that you had a coach and Michael behind you guiding you, it's absolutely incredible.
When I finally got the realization, or had the realization rather, oh, this
Oh.
is who you are, I was like, wow, how lucky, which, we all
Yeah,
have guides and angels, guardian angels, and what I call the heavy hitters, like the
yeah.
archangels. But it was just such an honor when I finally like put two and two together of what that was and is.
Yeah, that's so amazing. I can only imagine that moment where you're just like, oh my gosh, I was talking to Archangel Michael. What? So, is he still one of your primary guides that steps forward for you?
Hmm. Yeah, when I was younger, it was, I don't know how you both experience this, but when I tune into people's energy, or I see in my mind's eye these light beams, and I can see basically an outline, and knowing about celestial energy and how angelic energy comes in and how it feels, versus if it's someone who had crossed over and all of that, I can tell that and what that is. And so I call him like kind of more like my main man, or my main spirit guide,
Mm.
and my angel on my team. But he would show me, and I would see all the different types of spirit teams on people's, spirit teams, and how they showed up. And so he never really went by the wayside, but it always kind of makes me chuckle when somebody's like, who's on my team, and how many do I have, and how many guardian angels and things, because they're all there, and they step forward and they help us in different moments and different times. But I never really had, I mean, I learned who most of mine are, but I still don't even know who everybody is on my team. I tend to gravitate more mainly to Michael and Raphael, because the healing energy and the protective energy and the grounding that they provide. But yeah, he's definitely always around me.
Oh my gosh, I love that. For me, it's Archangel Gabriel. That's
Yeah,
who I
he's a good
call
one
my
too.
main man.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And he's a great one for communication too, and one of my
Yeah,
go-tos and
yeah,
everything. Yes.
yeah.
That's so interesting how you both experience that. And for me, it has been so different perhaps because I've been working with angels for a while now, but for me, it's clear sentience.
Mm-hmm.
So I just don't know who it is. I just know there's a lot of people around me. I just know, or when there's like spirits and people or loved ones who have crossed over, that's more clear to me. But on the angelic side of things, it's like someone's touching me. I don't know, but there he is. So that's so interesting how everything looks different for each one of us, and I think for the listeners to have that validation around that, it just shows up how it shows up for you,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that they have different ways to communicate with us. So you must be pestered with questions all the time with people. Like I do this with Christina all the time. And who is that? And what is his name? And what does he look like? So how did you navigate that in your life? Just seeing behind the world, or potentially having insights into what other people are thinking or feeling or what they're going through. How do you protect yourself in a way and protect your energy, or how do you
Mm-hmm.
manage that?
Yeah, the biggest, I would say my strongest, or the ones that come to the surface more, are the clairvoyance. So seeing a
Mhm.
lot in my mind's eye visually, but then also my clear empathy and feeling the emotions really deeply. And it was a struggle when I was little. There was a video I saw on social media a long time ago, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners have probably seen it too. And it's this little girl, and my heart was just like breaking for her, because she was in the car in the back seat, and she's crying and crying and crying and sobbing, and her mom or her dad is asking like, what's wrong with you? And she's like, in the trees and the leaves, I love all this energy. And it was fall or something, I think, and she was really upset because all the leaves were falling, and there was like this transition and this death. And my heart went out, because I was like, I remember feeling so deeply as a child and not being able to necessarily express all the things, whether it was something like nature or another person's energy and emotion. And so Michael was helpful for me as a child, because he taught me, all right, this is what you do. And he, would say, you feel your emotion, you allow it to be, then you breathe it out, and you picture it leaving your energy field, and then you have another emotion that comes in. What do you want to feel? Peace, calm, whatever that is. And so that is what I call like wringing the sponge. We're sponges, especially when we're clear empaths, and it gets really heavy with holding all that water weight. But then if you don't wring that sponge, then you continue to be heavy. But when we're not taught to feel that and to allow that expression to leave our energy field, whatever that looks like to you to do that, then we tend to block it and hold it in, and then that ends up becoming an unintentional block to whether it's living life, experiencing all the other things intuitively. So that was one thing from an emotional perspective as a child. And then there was other things. And my parents and my grandparents helped me with this too, because again, they were at least in the woo, but they would do things like picture a shield, or picture a bubble of light, or when you go into a crowd, or when you're at school. Because we moved around a lot when I was little. It was like 22 times before I even went to college. So imagine as a child and an empath going into new schools and constantly these new environments. So I got really good at being able to feel and experience and process as a child and what those different tools would be. But those are a few ways of how I learned. And then it became second nature. And so it wasn't until I got older and then I would express or share that with my friends, or then now obviously clients, about how to work with that and or help other children in your lives if you're a caretaker of a child who's highly intuitive or sensitive.
That is amazing.
Yeah, so powerful, so amazing. And I just want to come back to real quick the fact that you were so supported with the people in your everyday life, like your parents, your grandparents, like you mentioned, of being able to share with them and talk to them about it, and they were understanding and things like that. I think that is so beautiful. And, and it's so important, I feel, to be able to have that resource too, that you were able to then share that with like your friends and growing up. And I was actually going to ask you if growing up you felt, if there was any period in your time, like, sometimes the teenage years, early 20s, it's kind of like you get caught up in other things of life, or did you find that you maintained a consistent connection? Like, what was that experience like for you?
Yes. So I always, for the most part, maintained a consistent connection. However, I would say when I went to college, and this is really important for anyone to hear, when we go through major life transitions and changes, whether it's the loss of a job, a move, a divorce, a marriage, the death of someone, that sort of thing, we're often invited to, through that change, to evolve and to grow, not just emotionally and mentally, but spiritually. And so for me, college was one of those things. Like when I was in high school, I was the girl with the tarot cards, telling people because they would ask me who was around them. Like I was definitely out of, the woo closet. And especially when they came to my parents' house and they would see all the like time things that were like super, I mean, so that part was, okay. But when I went into college and you were presented with this, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? I'm sure I probably could have found like some sort of Harry Potter school in the metaphysical, but it wasn't like it is today where it's so easily accessible online. Google didn't exist at that point when I went to school. And so I felt very closed off when it came to feeling connected to the spiritual world when I was removed from my family and not being able to have that as a resource and a foundation. So I gravitated to life in college, typical college student, and figuring out what that is. And that was where I really experienced my first depression in my life and had to go even deeper. And it took me through my 20s until I revisited and got more into the spiritual, where I got my certification in Reiki. And then that's when I really started to acknowledge and figure out, oh, this is Michael. Oh, these are all the other archangels. The doors kind of blew off the hinges for me, and I was able to see, and it gave me that catalyst again to continue to experience and get on that path. Now, I didn't get into the work, meaning for professionally, it was more on a personal level, but it really helped me. And so that was definitely a big change in my life. And I would say, even then, looking back in college, I still would say to my roommates and other things, this is what I'm experiencing and this is what is happening. But I didn't have a spiritual routine every day, or I wasn't involved in it as much as I was when I was, through high school for the most part.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that. I think that's so valuable to be able to just kind of witness that part of the journey. And
Mm-hmm.
I think ultimately at the end of the day, it's knowing that you're always going to be led back, I feel, in some shape or form, and just knowing that you're supported, knowing that you're connected no matter what, and that you'll be led back, I think is the biggest thing.
Yeah,
That's amazing.
especially when you have a path and purpose. Every single one of us has a path and purpose to create and to be
Mhm.
here and to live life to the fullest, whatever that looks like for us. And so my whole thing is I've never not wanted to be connected. I've always felt really good in that energy and that space and trusting in it for the most part. So yeah, to me it was being able to revisit that and reminding myself even, hey, this is what you enjoy doing, meaning being connected to source and everything else. So,
Cool.
yes, thank you for asking that question.
It's really important. I think it's such and as you were saying, this was just not normal or out there back then, and it can be such an isolating experience for people, and such especially if you're not exposed to it within your family and within your circle. And right now you can go to social media and find other people like you, right? And you feel seen and validated, but was that was not the case necessarily. And that's why I think these platforms are so important, to normalize those conversations and
Mhm.
help people feel seen and validated in these kinds of experiences. And hearing other people's stories is so helpful for others to navigate their own struggles, especially if they're alone in it. So
Yes,
that's fantastic.
absolutely.
Yeah.
You're never alone. You always have your spirit team.
Well, yeah.
And like you said, there's always social media
Yeah,
if and when if you
there,
choose to be on it.
I know. For people now, for young people these days, it's an entirely different experience. I When you were mentioning your tarot cards, I remember I was that girl. I used to bring my angel oracle. I had an angel oracle back then, and someone reminded me that I used to do readings for my friends back in school all the time growing up. So yeah, that was definitely me too.
That's
And
amazing.
now let's shift gears a little bit, because I have been going through your socials, and I've noticed that you have a very strong connection with the energy of Egypt, the goddess. Can we maybe hear a little bit about that? Super
Oh
interesting.
gosh. Yeah, so I have been to Egypt once in this lifetime physically. I went, I don't even remember how long ago it was. And when I went, it was always on my bucket list, but it was more I would call my spiritual bucket list. I knew I had to go there. And so when I went, it was feeling like home, just this big homecoming. The energy, the best way I can say it is like this warm hug that just felt like home, even though visually it looked very different. And from what I could see in my mind's eye, like in my mind's eye, it was more lush and green and all that. But energetically, the essence was still there. And so anyway, I went there, but I always said when I decide to go back, because it was a when I decided to go back, it was going to be with spiritually like minded people. At the time, it was with a bunch of scuba divers because it was like a fam trip, which is sort for familiarization trip. And it was with the Egypt. The government was trying to get people to come in and bring more business and tourism there. So I went. I was really lucky, but it was different. It wasn't exactly experiencing it in the way that I wanted to on that spiritual level. But the other thing is that as I was growing up, I always felt that connection to Egypt, and so I would do past life regressions. My sister and I are 9.5 years apart. And so when I was in high school, I would have her, I'm the eldest, and I would have her read to me from books, like the past life regression steps. And I would go back and I would have these experiences. And I remember being in what I would call Atlantis, and how there was a connection with Atlantis to Egypt. And it was pretty much where they were instilling and creating this new culture. And they wanted to make sure that wisdom and knowledge was spread throughout different continents, and that it wasn't only in one place, because they knew what was going to happen with Atlantis and everything else. And so I always just felt this connection. And that is where I guess I would say it felt like I never really stepped out of that life necessarily.
That's so cool. I love that you brought up Atlantis actually, because I feel like that's been coming up a lot for me recently. Just like this remembrance of Atlantis and the remembrance of those ancient times and Egypt. I've always been drawn to Egypt. Egypt is like in my heart too. Like you said, spiritual bucket list. I'm like, it's
Mm-hmm.
on my spiritual bucket list.
Come, we have two
Yes.
spots left.
Oh, perfect. Louisa, we're going.
There you go. That's it.
But wow, that's so incredible, so beautiful. So do you have what's your plan this time? Obviously it's spiritually focused. Are you going to be going to the pyramids? Are you like doing self-led excursion? I'm not even
Mhm.
sure how
Yeah,
it
so it's
works.
more, yeah. So
Yeah.
the person I'm doing this with is Brianna Clover. And very quickly, I'll say I had plans to do this Egypt retreat, and things were not necessarily aligning, and they were falling through for a variety of reasons. And so I was like, okay, I'm just gonna put that aside. I know that this needs to happen because I'm feeling led and guided to put something together for people. And I would get a lot of requests like, are you gonna do any retreats? I'm like, girlfriends, I have a full-time job. When am I gonna do a retreat in addition to everything else? But so it was at this psychic festival, and Brianna had stopped by and she was talking to Scott, my co-author with the book Looking for Angels, and I was in a session or something, so I wasn't able to talk with her. And I met her previously before, and she had mentioned how she was putting together a retreat, but she wasn't sure if anyone was necessarily going to go because she didn't have a platform or anything. And she had just mentioned it to the side. Scott knew I was looking to do this, so I connected with her and said, hey, would you want to partner up on this? And the rest is history. And so as far as the trip itself goes, she had already had the itinerary set, and it's, yes, we're going to be in Cairo, we're going to be in Luxor, but it really is more of a pilgrimage. So it's about connecting with the land, connecting with the different energy, the goddess energies that are in ancient Egypt, using our intuition, tuning in, really being able to be present and see what kind of shifts energetically, what types of activations. I use that word, I don't use it lightly. What types
Mm.
of activations and shifts happen when we're there, what needs to occur from a spiritual growth and journey perspective. So very excited. I think one point, she's the one that knows all, like she's the brains behind the operation when it comes to the actual itinerary. But at one point we're going to do like a hot air balloon ride so we can kind of see it from a different ground, not from the ground, but from a different level and a vantage point. So yes, everything is built through that with intention. There's a lot we're not able to talk about publicly
Mhm.
because of, I don't want to say safety, but from a cultural perspective and respect in terms of what we're going to be doing there. But it's all going to be amazing, and it's built for people who are interested in feeling led in the call to make some shifts when it comes to their spiritual growth.
Wow.
That's amazing. And very much on theme with the spiritual growth, stepping into your purpose. It's all going there today, apparently. I want to take a step back. You just talked about your book. And that's, I
Mm-hmm.
think, because we've heard that story, and it's another great example of divine timing and where things are meant to come together. They do. So don't you worry. Your life's purpose is just right there. It's going to happen and unfold. Can you tell us a little bit more about how that came together, but also what the book is about? And
Yeah, sure. And this also goes back to the very first question, I think, Christina, that you were asking, where it was, how do you know to trust and or follow your intuition, especially when it may be a leap where you're not necessarily sure, and how do you take that? So what was happening was I was preparing for a session in the evening, and I have a specific process that I do before that. And I was really tuning in to the person and the questions that they were having at the time, and I heard it was very different. It's like when I'm receiving messages for a person, it's front and center in my minds, and psychically and energetically it's very there. But to my right in my head, I heard, you need to write about us. And I could tell, because I've been speaking my angels for so long, that was my angels, and it wasn't a message for this person. So I got a little frustrated because I'm like, dude, here I am trying to channel for this person.
kind of
And
work.
yeah, I'm trying to work, and like, it's not about me, number one, but number two, like, when in the God's green earth am I going to have time to also write a book with everything else I had going on? And so I said, hey, and I have a really great loving relationship with my guides and angels. I was like, let's put a pin in that. I call it like the psychic pin of, all right, let's put it on the shelf, put a pin in it, we'll revisit that. So that way I was still focused on the session, got done with that session. So then later it's like, okay, what was it that you were saying? What do you mean write about us? And I said, can I write on my website? Do I write some social media content? What is this? And they said, no, it needs to be a book. And so I took this deep breath of, okay, again, I don't know the first thing about writing a book. I haven't done it before, but if this is what you want me to do, and this is divinely led and in the divine timing, I will honor this request and I will do it, but I need the person, the resources, and or whatever that looks like in order to make this happen. And the message came through at a time in my life where I was really trying to set energetic boundaries with spirit, but also in my life as a whole, and not take too much on my plate. And I thought I bought myself some time, like, oh, this is gonna, maybe months later or a year later, something would manifest and come into being. Not even, I think, like 24 hours later, I had an email from Dr. Scott Guerin, and the subject was, I'm writing a book and I'm working, it's about angels, and I did all the history and the psychological and the scientific aspects of it, but I need somebody that has a modern day perspective and does this regularly, and I thought of you, would you be interested? And so when that happened, I was like, okay, I can't ignore this. And then he said, oh, and by the way, I have the resources to self publish and I'm happy to help you with your portions and everything else. And I was like, all right, I got to do it. I need to
Yeah.
honor spirit's call. And that's what I say for anyone out there where if you're like, I don't know how I'm going to do something. I don't have the time. I don't have the resources. We make all these excuses, which again are also legitimate excuses for the most part, but we
Mhm.
can reprioritize and we can also ask, like, okay, yes, if you want me to do these things and this is feeling my purpose and I'm being called and led to do this, then make it happen for me.
Yeah.
But I am also not beholden as a human being to make everything work and happen. That's how it works with spirit. They meet us 50%, we have to meet them 50% of the way, and then from there it's history. But there's only so much they can do to tee it up for us. We actually need to take the steps and do it in
Mhm.
order for it to manifest and happen. It's like if I wanted to find someone and find the love of my life, I'm not going to find them necessarily by not being on a dating app or sitting in my home and being a hermit, unless maybe they know and they got the call and be like, I'm going to go to so and so's store and knock on it, but I mean, that you still need to take some steps in order for that to then happen.
That's so aligned
Yes.
with today and a workshop that happened earlier. And yes, we definitely, God can't guide us if we don't take action. He can't get you anywhere if you don't take the first step. So that is very much aligned with the theme of the day. You just mentioned something, and this is just personal curiosity of working with a client and what that process feels like and is for you. Can you walk us through what that is?
Sure. So I treat my sessions the same way I approach my day to day life. I call them bookends. So for
Mhm.
my personal day to day life, every morning before I'm even rolling out of bed, and then if I don't do it when I'm in bed, I have that after when I'm drinking my coffee. I ask myself how I'm feeling mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, and I tune into my own intuition. And then I start my conversation with my guides and angels by saying, all right, what do you have for me today? What do I need to know? What do I need to do? And then at the end of the day, I reflect. And that also is usually in bed. It's like part of my wind down, bedtime routine. And I don't have to like write a journal necessarily, but I reflect on my day. And so my sessions are, as I'm preparing for it, is very similar. So I do a prayer and an intention to connect with that person. Obviously, I have permission if they booked a session with me. And I start to tune in and call in my guides and angels, their guides and angels. If it's a first session with someone or they've had it rather with me, I say that prayer out loud with them so that they can hear it because I think that's really important. And then every session, no matter what, I always do a closing prayer and intention to sever the energetic connection, but also to move things into being and into existence based on what we discussed, especially depending on the focus area. So that's very high level how I prepare and then what the session looks like. But it also can depend on what I'm getting ahead of time, an hour, 30 minutes before a session, about what I either need to do energetically or if there's anything else that I need to prepare. I don't really use a lot of tools anymore, like cards or pendulums or crystals or anything of that nature. It's really more calling in my spirit team and their spirit team and what that would be and have them assist. It's kind of like when you're in surgery, and as a surgeon, you're not the only one in the room doing all the tasks and stuff, but you do the preparation ahead of time and in the room during the surgery itself. So that's kind of like what it is. What's it like for you both? How do you guys prepare? I'm curious.
That's amazing to hear. Mine is similar in the sense of like having that energetic time beforehand to do the prayer, set an intention. I also do kind of like a quick energetic thing for myself where I just imagine my highest self like coming forward, where it's like none of my ego, none of my like
Mm-hmm.
swirling thoughts from the day or whatever to do tasks or triggers or whatever I've been experiencing. I feel like I just leave that at the door, and then I just kind of surround myself with my angels, my guides. I feel my divine self coming forward. And then I also kind of imagine how I'm creating like this space, like I'm holding this energetic space and my client is stepping in. And so then it's kind of like we're in this space together and then the session starts. So very similar in that sense. And for me, the reset that I like to do, honestly, like to kind of close off, like once I'm done and reset my energy, is I actually like to lay down. Like I will step away from my desk and I'm like, I need to lay down horizontally somewhere, whether it's my bed or on the couch or somewhere, and just have a moment to just like be horizontal. I don't know what it is, but
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I heard someone say something about that one time, like being horizontal, or I don't know. And I was like, huh, I'm going to try that. And I didn't think anything of it. But then when I actually started doing it, I was like, I feel like that's like a very quick reset for me for some reason. I don't know
That's
why,
cool.
like going upright to horizontal. So I try to do that if I can.
Oh,
So,
that's cool.
So
Yeah, I noticed that if I've done a lot of work, or not I have, but we've done a lot of work within the session, that laying down afterwards helps decompress.
mm,
And my guides and angels were saying it's because if you're laying down, you're basically grounding. You're on a physical, like a
oh,
bed or what have you, and it's more of your physical mass that's touching. So it's forcing you in a good way to be back in your body, is
interesting.
what I
I
just
love
heard.
that.
So
Oh,
yeah.
perfect. So
So we're all
good.
gonna do it now.
Yes.
exactly. We're gonna do it now. Now we know. I physically need to shake things off because I feel it. So
Hmm.
for me, like physically shaking it off or going outside or like, creating that separation is important, and just being in nature, touching grass, like, but again, it goes back to grounding. That is interesting how that works. And then let's talk about how, again, personal curiosity, because we all see things differently. How do you perceive angels?
Oh, mine is more, it is about feeling that presence that I was
Mm-hmm.
talking about before. Often, not, I shouldn't say often, very rarely will I see them with my physical eyes, and I don't see the being with the wings or anything like that, although I do know people that can. Mine is more, when that happens, I see lights, like almost like Christmas lights that are on a tree, but it depends on what color. So Michael's definitely blue for me. I didn't know that until, I looked it up later. But and then Raphael, if you look up the color, is usually green, but tends to be for me purple, more that violet color. So that can be a way, but it's really more from a presence perspective and emotionally. I call it that angelic or that celestial, frequency that comes with them. It feels really safe, calm, peaceful, godlike, I guess, not because they are God, but they're coming from source and universal energy. So it's really more that on the emotional side as well. And then when I'm tuning in psychically through my clairvoyance, I see those light beams in my head and my mind, not my head, but like my third eye, and I can see them as massive, like these really big beings of light. But then when it's someone who has crossed over as a human soul, they're like a typical average light size human being. But that's some of the ways that I experience them. In terms of, it's not really seeing them as much, but hearing them, it's more of that clairaudient in my head when they're having more of a conversation, that sort of dialogue. But those are some ways that they show up for me.
That's so interesting. It's so different for everyone.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's really cool. So for you, Nicole, do you find that if like let's say you're in a session with someone that between your different clairs it kind of ebbs and flows, like you're seeing them, but then like you're hearing something and then there's a knowing, and then it's just kind of a mixture of all the
Yeah.
different senses? Is that kind of how it
Yes, yes, exactly. It wasn't until recently where I started to realize more it's telepathic than anything as far as a
right?
communication, a back and forth. But it all depends on the focus of really the reading or the appointment with someone. If somebody really wants to know who's on their team, I worked out a system with my guides and angels where, again, I picture them in my mind's eye. And then based on where they're standing, I know, and what they look like and they feel like energetically, I know. And then the communication in terms of the messages and how it comes through is through the intuition. But I talk about all the time how when I was writing the book, because I was like, how am I going to explain this to people? Because it's hard when you do it. It's kind of like telling people, all right, this is how you drive a car, without really showing them how to drive a car. You sit in your seat, you put your feet on the brakes, you look behind you, all that kind of stuff. But it's easier to also show as you're doing it. But I say that because when I am receiving information and how an angel will show up, it really depends on the reading and what the purpose is. And the threads, that's what I was going to say, is that they showed me in my mind's eye that our intuition is like colored threads. Like if you think about them as each one's a different, one might be hot pink and one might be this really vibrant blue, not because that's actually the color, but this cobweb of sorts and threads, and they're all separate yet interconnected. And when we're working with our intuition, often people can get frustrated when they think, oh, I saw 1111. Why am I no longer seeing 1111? Why am I no longer seeing repeating numbers? When in reality, your intuition may be picking up a different way. You may start to see something visually in your mind's eye, or you may start to feel something emotionally. When you're asking a question, that answer that follows after you first receive your message may not be the exact same way you were getting it before. It may follow up in a different way. So yes, that is how, for me, my intuition works, is it ebbs and flows, and it picks up. That's why I call it the puzzle pieces of, oh, this is how this came in. All right, click. This is how this is coming in. But being able to sense how it's showing up and then putting those pieces together is how I communicate with my spirit team or with somebody else's spirit team members.
So cool. So fascinating. I love hearing about, it's so unique and different for every person. And then there's also the common threads. I
Mm-hmm.
also always talk about how, oh, like a puzzle piece just came in, or, sometimes it feels like a piece of information is not quite clear yet. So it's kind of like, no, like it's there, but we don't know exactly the details yet. So,
Mm-hmm.
we'll set that piece aside for now. But I wanted to transition a bit and hear more about I guess, your perspectives or your ideas moving forward now that you've, stepped into this work like full time. Kind of what do you envision for yourself? What do you feel called to step into even more so now that, you're kind of having more of that spaciousness? Have you been shown anything? Are you working on something that you're able or ready to share? What is that looking like for you?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So, when I had that message from Source, you need to start a podcast, I was, my first question back was, really? That's it? Not be, what? That's my answer to purpose. And yes, it's important to help people feel connected and help share stories that they're not alone. Super important. But I didn't necessarily see, to your point, like, what does that puzzle piece look like in terms of the bigger picture? And one of the symbols or the ways that my guides and angels communicate to me that's universal for me is they show me the Wizard of Oz, the curtain of the Wizard of Oz, to where when I'm trying to see past that curtain or past that thing, I'm not always shown everything. And that's the message that I get, that they're saying, you're not ready. You're not ready to receive this bigger picture yet. And it's super frustrating if that ever happens to anyone, because you're like, no, I just want to know, like, what are the steps that I need to do, and tell me A, B, C, all the way to Z. And so at that time, I was like, it feels bigger, no offense to my podcast, than it's a podcast. It feels like there's something bigger. And they said, yes, you're creating community where people can connect and they can hear from other guests, but eventually creating a platform or a way for people, think about it like LinkedIn, where you're able to meet other people and all of that. And so I was like, well, it sounds fascinating. Tell me more. And then that's when I got the Wizard of Oz curtain type of thing, where I wasn't able to see past that. And the other thing, too, just if I may, as far as additional kind of puzzle pieces, is it was the same thing with the sessions. I never thought, my whole goal with the podcast was, I'm going to have guests on so that other people can connect with these guests. They're the ones offering services. This is not something that I necessarily need to do. And my guides and angel said, you're not going to be doing sessions forever, but you do need to do them for these reasons. And it was really to not only better understand my intuition, but also be able to sense and see patterns when certain people are coming to me and I'm like, ooh, there's a theme. A bunch of people are coming and it's all about this one topic, but yet they're not talking to each other. But then this is what it means. And so being able to really create a platform and a community where beyond the podcast that people can connect and meet and learn from one another is really the big vision of what I'm creating. And while like the retreats and the pilgrimages are one piece of it to get in person, it's really about, again, creating that community. They showed me, this was way before AI was what it is now. And I didn't understand this. This is when like VR was really popular, which, by the way, whatever happened to that?
I
Kind of
know.
like what, you know what I mean? But they were showing me these situations where people were going in digitally. They didn't use the word AI at the time, but they were saying technologically people are going to be connecting in these ways that they were never before. and you need to get ahead of that. And I was like, okay, well, what does that look like? And they said the technology is going to evolve over time. So those are all some things. And I don't mean to be cryptic, because part of it is I am figuring it out as, the right people are falling into my lap, or falling into my path, similar to like how Scott did, but what that looks like and how that's going to be built from now. But eventually, I would say probably in less than a year, a lot of this is going to be something that I'm offering when it comes to the broader public. And then in the meantime, I did launch and just released Open Doors for a membership, which is called the Psychic Club. And we're going to meet for the first time in July. That's going to be our very first call. And this is going to be what I call a beta test in order to then build out the platform for what it's going to look like for people moving forward.
That's amazing. Oh my gosh, that sounds so powerful, so incredible, and like just it feels like just the beginning of everything, like something much bigger. So that's super exciting.
And what
Yeah.
happens at this club? Is it like Hogwarts for psychic people?
Pretty much. It's like I'm creating what did not exist for me
Right.
back then, which I really, but that's the thing. Like, if anyone's listening, this is the message that's really powerful that they need to that they need to hear. My guides and angels are saying is that create the thing that you want, that you wished existed, even if it already exists and somebody else is doing it, doesn't mean that you're not and you can't. But when you do that from passion and you do that from heart, there's no way you're going to fail, because it is a message that's coming from source, and it's part of your purpose and your destiny and where you're led.
That's amazing. And I think it makes all the difference when you do things with the clarity that whoever needs it is going to find it, and whoever needs to listen will tune in. And so you do it. Yeah. It's just out of love and out of something different, and
Yeah.
things will fall into place usually.
And I realized I didn't answer your question, but yes, it is like Hogwarts. So we're going to talk about every month is a theme, and we're going to work on things similar to a workshop. And then there's going to be group healings. There is going to be the opportunity to ask live Q&As. It's pretty much like a gym membership, or a membership for your soul. And that is what I am building out for now. But it's going to be a lot of more hands-on type of activities, so that people feel like that there's a connection. Because right now with the podcast, it is a one-way street for the most part. Like, I'm speaking into a mic, but there's not necessarily opportunity for the feedback. And yes, there's the sessions and it's one-on-one, but now what is this, one to many, it's not one-to-one, it's one to many. How does that grow in, again, community, and how does that look? So that's what I'm hoping to achieve. Not hoping, I will achieve it. That's what they just said. So
Don't know. You're on it.
yeah.
That's so great. It sounds like so much fun. And yes, something that I just thinking back or thinking now about the people that are out there in the world with these things, and they have no idea what to do with them. And I just keep coming back to my own community and just going back to Latin America. This is just not a thing that exists. So having those resources in place for people with so many incredible gifts, for them to put them to use and step into their light and into their purpose, that would be just amazing. So the best of luck with that, because you're
Thank you.
doing God's work.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, so incredible to hear all that. So, on a parting note, I have two questions. One is, what is one message that you feel maybe the collective is wanting to hear, needing to hear at this moment? If you have anything to share that's just like intuitively coming through. And then after that, if you want to share more about where people can find you online, where can they connect with you, stay in touch with you, book a session, find out more about Egypt, join the Psychic Club, whatever it might be.
Sure. Yes. Thank you. So when you asked the question, I immediately heard that it's still heavy out there. There are a lot of people that are feeling lost, or they don't know where to turn and where to go. And this is actually a really pivotal moment, not only in their soul's growth and journey, but where we are in the world, in actually a positive way, even though things seem really dark and dire. And it's remembering what you came here to do. And what we came here to do is to create. Create could be, I want to have a family. Create could be, I want to create art. It could be, I want to learn more and create a better life for myself using my intuition, whatever that looks like to you. And it can be many, many things, but it's to create. And through that creation, we are in flow and we are in alignment, and we are moving and taking those steps that need to be in terms of that bigger picture for ourselves. And that's what our focus needs to be, not what our neighbors are doing, not necessarily what else is happening, not because we can't have compassion and still take action in a lot of instances, but it's more about when we're taking care of our house and ourself and our energy, that is what ripples out. Because if everyone did that, gosh, like that would truly be kind of peace on earth. If we were all taking care of ourselves in our house and being happy and creating, we would be in that state of love and flow. And so that's what I'm hearing more than anything. So if you're waiting for your sign, or you're like, what do I do? Where do I go? Then ask, what do I do? Where do I go? But really go within to say, what is my heart telling me that I need to create and that I need to do? And it doesn't always have to be this big leap. It can be something small, and start small and take that first step.
Oh my gosh, so beautiful. I love that so much. That idea of what am I here to create? So beautiful.
Yeah,
And just
it's about creation. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
what the creator wanted us. I mean, again, whatever you think about God,
right.
the universe and source, is to experience this human life, or actually I should say, or spiritual being having this human experience. But, and then as far as where people can reach me, apsychicstory.com is my website, a psychic story on all social handles. And that is where you can find information about the book and about the Egypt retreat and about the membership. But if you are also wondering, where do I get Looking for Angels? If you don't want to support Amazon, then you can go to your local bookstore. But we also have a website, lookingforangelsbook.com. I feel like there's still some signed copies there, but we also have an audio version. And yeah, I try to be pretty accessible. So find me wherever it's easy. And then obviously the podcast. Please listen.
Of course.
Amazing. I love it. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Yeah, and what you do. It's not easy podcasting. It's a full-time job. So thank you for doing what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. It was also actually one of those things that was very divinely guided, very divinely like breadcrumbs into place. And Luis and I got together, we're like, yeah, we're gonna do this thing, and it's been amazing.
Yeah, exact same experience in the sense of what are my next steps, and what I heard was podcast and book, and I was like, sure.
Well, if you need any tips or you have any questions, I'm sure you'll get them from your angels, but you're welcome to also ask me, because trust me, it's a process.
And then you're like, sure, what do we do with this information? And yeah, what do you know that it sort of fell in our lap, and the podcast kind of came from there. But yeah, exact same thing. If you ask, they'll tell you. And then you're like, okay, I surrender. Let's go and just show me the way, and things will happen magically overnight. Things will happen and change. So it's just leaning into that trust, and just let yourself just be along.
Yeah, when people say, when people ask me, what do you mean by leaning in? Like, it's like leaning in, embrace it, surrender, let go. That's what it means.
Don't fight it. Stop fighting
strap in for the ride.
And it's really great that you get to look at life and just enjoy kind of the drama. And you're like, how are you going to solve this? How are you going to do this? I can't wait to
Not my circus, not my monkey.
Exactly.
You told me to do this, so you have to find a way, because I'll do it, but help me, help you.
Get there. Yeah, the peace that comes when you lean in. Truly. So yeah, it's just a different way to go through life, and I love it so much. So that's great.
Well, thank you both so much again. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for coming. And to our listeners, make sure that you go and check out all the things from Nichole. We'll have all the links in the show notes below. And thank you once again, Nichole.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye.